Maybe you've had an experience like this. The weekend's over and you're talking to your friends on Monday about the insanity and the hilarity of the last few days. You tell them everything without skimping on a single detail. You're at your cousin's wedding. There was a ferret, and you don't know if you can even look at a wedding cake ever again. Oh man, what a crazy random happenstance. And then it hits you, that moment when you realize you're the only one laughing, but you're not just laughing, you're practically in tears just remembering the look on Aunt Griselda's face. And finally you just end up with, you just had to be there. In moments like these, you realize something really important. They don't get it. It seems so obviously and objectively hilarious to you, so why isn't anybody joining in? Getting people to see things your way is almost never easy. You want people to know what it's like to be you and to see the world the way you see it, and sometimes the facts just aren't enough to affect people. So how do you get people to see the world the way you do? I'm Cale Prindle, and today we're going to talk all about comparisons to bring people into your story on this week's Words from the Muck. Here's an important fact. Only you know what it's like to be you. Even when people have similar experiences, the way your brain processes everything makes your perspective unique. This is why two people can experience the same joke or song or event and feel completely different about it. Because of this, you can't just give facts about something and hope people will feel anything special like you do. Instead, what you have to do is make comparisons. There are several different methods of comparing things, and today we're going to talk about three common ways: analogies, similes, and metaphors. An analogy is a comparison between two different things that works by simplifying an idea or concept for your audience. Let's say you go to the doctor because you're sick, and they start talking literally about what the new treatment will do for you. I'm not a doctor, so my eyes are probably just going to glaze over when the doctor tells me about Clostridium difficile, ribosomes, and polymorphonuclear leukocytes. I need something easier than the facts of what modern medicine will do for me, so maybe my doctor throws in an analogy. The new treatment will act like soldiers, searching out the infection and eliminating it. That's easier to explain than getting into the work of white blood cells and all the other medical mumbo-jumbo. So comedian Jim Gaffigan uses an analogy in the opening of his album, Mr. Universe, to explain how challenging life can be when you have 4 children.
If you want to know what it's like to have a 4th, just imagine you're drowning, and then someone hands you a baby.
So in case this isn't news to you, having kids is hard, but Gaffigan doesn't just go into the myriad of challenges actually associated with having children. He doesn't get specific about having no time, no sleep, no peace. He could go into the pressures and stressors added to your life, like trying to figure out if it's my turn or my wife's turn to wake up at 2:30 in the morning to clean up the puke little Timmy just covered himself in, or who gets to change the atomic diaper bomb, or who gets to feed the kids and gets them ready for bed and ready for school and ready for life. Gaffigan doesn't do any of that because it doesn't mean anything to anybody who doesn't already have kids, especially multiple kids. He could have gone into the realities of being outnumbered by all the tiny people in your house, but instead he keeps it simple. It's like drowning, but more desperate. In that instant, we understand the craziness, the struggle, and a little bit about the reality. Other ways to compare come by way of metaphor and simile, which are technically different, but they accomplish pretty much the same thing. Whereas an analogy often takes a complex idea and makes it easier to understand, metaphors and similes pack in as much meaning as they can in just a few words to keep you thinking. Let's look at an Emily Dickinson classic, Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. In this poem, Dickinson is using a metaphor to compare hope with a bird, and without going into full analysis mode, let's look at why she would do that. Birds are free. They can fly, so they seem to defy gravity or limitations. You can hear them in the morning after the long hours of darkness, and that seems like a pretty good way to think about hope. Now, metaphors are sometimes hidden. The writer usually won't tell you, here comes the comparison, but similes, on the other hand, keep you posted when something's about to be compared to something else. The words like or as will show up to signal the upcoming comparison. For some people, this makes things easier, but just like a metaphor, the goal is to complicate an idea and give the reader something more to think about. So let's look at the similes in Langston Hughes's Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. or does it explode? For this poem, remember that every new idea is being compared to a dream that can't come to fruition. So maybe your hopes and dreams dry up and become something else entirely, or maybe they become painful and gross. Maybe they weigh you down in life because you never got to know what could have been, or maybe they become volatile and violent. The similes in this poem give us new ways to think about being denied something important in life. And you can either say, when you don't get to live out your dreams, it really sucks. Or you can provide comparisons that help your reader understand that there is something more profound and more important happening. Using comparisons is an essential part of becoming an efficient communicator. It's not just for poetry and Shakespeare or whatever. Comparisons also help you establish the severity or the levity of an experience or an idea. But just as important, good comparisons create good storytelling. They bring your words from the muck and let them breathe independently on dry land. So if you crashed on the ski slopes and you broke your femur, how are you gonna tell other people about the pain? It hurt, like a lot. Ow. Well, so do paper cuts and stubbed toes. You broke your leg. The force required to do that is the same force it would take to like snap a baseball bat. And it sounded like a tree trunk as it cracks and falls over. So you might want to use those comparisons. It felt like someone smashed my leg with a baseball bat, but from the inside. And it sounded like a piece of celery being snapped in two. Makes you a little bit more squeamish, right? But isn't that what you want? To have other people understand our pain, our sorrow, our joy, our laughter, even if it's just for a little bit. Even if it's just a silly story about a ferret in a wedding cake. It might seem silly at times to always be talking about things like they're other things, but that's how we communicate best. You know, unless you've perfected like the Vulcan mind meld. I mean, you can't just transfer your experience to somebody else. Good writing is finding the language that gets meaning and experience into another person's mind, and comparisons give you the most bang for your buck. Thanks for watching Words from the Muck. Makes us happier than a nerd at Comic-Con. It really does. Go ahead and rate this episode down in the comments below. Use some kind of comparison. Use a metaphor, a simile, or an analogy. Also, share, like, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. And until next time, farewell, good people.